Um, with that, I love the socks, by the way. I'm going to turn this over to Matt, and he can teach us a few things. And type your questions in anytime, and we'll get to them probably starting about 15 minutes from now.
Yeah, or maybe a little less today, but we'll see. So get those questions coming. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was, and I'm sure I've talked about this before, but it's on my mind. It's understanding when defensiveness comes up in our relationship. So let's say I'm approached by my partner, or my partner says something or does something, and I feel defensiveness come up. Our first move typically, well, it depends on, our style, whether we're a pursuer or withdrawer, is that we either typically want to like defend ourselves, like obviously because it's defensiveness, right? Or explain ourselves. And a lot of people will, or we could just feel the defensiveness come up. That signals conflict for us, and we're out, right? We might be a withdrawer and to take on off. And one of the things that I've spent quite a bit of time trying to teach people is really we've got to tune in to ourselves, to our body, and understand defensiveness and try and figure out, is there shame going on behind this? Is it some attachment wound that's coming up? Is it both? Usually when we're defensive and trying to explain ourselves, we are actually trying to pull our partner in. We're trying to pull that person closer to us. And we want them to hear us. We want them to understand us. But we also need to recognize that depending on how it comes from us, right? In fact, I'll retract that a little bit. No matter how our partner hears it, whether we say it perfectly or not, it can be interpreted from the other person in any sort of way. So I always try and tell people, try not to focus on saying it right, because when we try really hard to say it right all the time, especially if it doesn't have the outcome we're wanting, then we start to get exhausted and feel hopeless. But when that defensiveness comes up, one of the most important things to do is just to own and say, hey, you know what, I can feel my defensiveness coming up, and then own what we want to do. What I want to do is explain myself. I'm afraid that if I did that, you might pull away, or you might get mad and defend yourself. And even take it back to the base. What I'm wanting is for you to hear me. And so recognizing the defensiveness, owning it, it's mine, it's in my body, and the behavior I want to do is this. So as I learn to share that with my partner, and maybe even have an ask, here's what I want, here's what I would like, but I'm too scared to ask for it, right? Owning and sharing our part of our defensiveness, owning and sharing our story. A lot of times we want to say, well, I wouldn't be defensive if you didn't do this. And that may or may not be true, right? Like, we have to own that defensiveness is mine. My desire to yell at you is mine. It is my choice. So learning to own that, back to that accountability piece, my defensiveness, my story, and how it might impact my partner, what I need from my partner. So just kind of the piece I wanted to throw out there, recognizing our defensiveness and sharing that with our partner, rather than spiraling into maybe the argument or the content that is coming up for us. Because in that moment, I'm really angry that I found a receipt, and we know what finding a receipt means. I mean, hopefully that makes sense. I stopped talking right as you took your drink.
Like mid-drink. Thank you, Matt. And by the way, everybody, ask us questions. Use the Q&A feature, the chat feature, preferably Q&A. We don't have any right now, but I do. You talked about feeling it in your body.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
totally. So what I like to tell people, like if you think about it, all of our emotions, there is typically a physiological response associated with that emotion. So lots of times I'll ask people like, what are you feeling in your, what are you feeling? And they'll want to tell me a thought. What I'm feeling is, she's really mean. And it's like, no, 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 what are you feeling, right? And you want to go to the emotion. And it's hard. If we don't have the vocabulary emotionally to be able to tell somebody, I'm actually feeling really hurt, I'm feeling really sad, I'm feeling lonely, we can actually go much simpler than that, right? What did you feel in that moment? I got a pit in my stomach. I had my shoulders were burning. My chest was on fire, right? I had a lump in my throat. We have physiological responses that are occurring, right? Typically, anger, for instance, is one that more people maybe tend to be familiar with their physiological responses. Maybe it's a more acceptable social emotion, not that it's always the most healthy, depending on how we handle it. But people will say, oh, I get mad and I clench my jaw, or I clench my fists, or I feel my shoulders tighten, or my chest puff out. So when I say feel it in your body, notice your physiological response. And sometimes I have what's called a chart of emotions. And you can do a search on the internet and probably come up with a bunch of really good ones. There's things like the emotions wheel, I think, if I remember right. And it helps us understand all the different emotions that we might feel. But sometimes I'll ask somebody, how often do you feel sad? And they'll tell me, oh, I don't ever feel sad, and it's like, okay, well, you ask them emotions and they're not in tune enough. But I'll say, when was the last time this week you just had a pit in your stomach? When's the last time in your week that you just felt your heart sink? And we tend to remember these physiological moments. So I tell people, tune in to what's going on to your body. And if that's the first thing you express, that actually can be amazing, because I'm now allowing, if I tell somebody, hey, I have a pit in my stomach, typically they're not going to react as defensively, if at all, because they're more likely to be curious. What happened? Why do you have a pit in your stomach? Well, can I just talk a little bit about the pit in my stomach and the feeling that I'm had and maybe what I need right now? I don't know, Scott, what do you think? Is this helpful?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I was like, because that's what I get when I'm about to get defensive. I get a pit in my stomach and my face turns red. You always know. My face it hides nothing.
You are one of those people. You can't hide a thing, Scott.
No, I really can't. And then if I don't nip it in the bud really quickly, my brain short circuits, and I just can't stop myself from lashing out. Well, that's not true. I get defensive.
Your brain short circuits? Is that what you said?
Short circuits, yeah. Well, and that ability to respond goes away, and suddenly I'm reacting instead of responding.
Yeah. Well, we actually, it's not a short circuit. It's actually a good function of your brain, believe it or not. Now, whether it's been trained in a healthy way, a positive way, is another story. But like that automatic reaction on your part is a survival mechanism that the brain developed. You could talk to people who are smarter about evolution and all that sort of thing than I am, but essentially the brain developed this fight, flight, or freeze response as a way to survive. And so somewhere in your life, in those moments, that's a survival response that's happening. So your brain isn't actually short-circuiting, it's taking over because there's a threat.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you're realizing it's a pit in the stomach is where it starts.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty simultaneous, but it's, I read it as a threat, and I respond as if it's a threat. I go into fight, flight, freeze, and usually it's fight. Occasionally it's flight. Yeah. Rarely is it freeze. I don't freeze. I either.
Oh, see, that's so funny. I'm such a freeze person. Freeze is like, oh man, it's the best place in the world. Just play dead.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really off topic. We had a cat when I was growing up, and she weighed 4 pounds. She was the teeniest cat, and she would catch bunny rabbits. We lived at the edge of a cornfield, and they would weigh like 20 pounds, and she would drag them over acres and acres of cornfield and deposit them at the back door and be all proud, and we'd bring her in, and then the rabbits would get up and hop off. They just froze until she was gone, and then they hopped away because she just wasn't big enough to hurt them.
That is funny.
So yeah, it's a natural, and that was their survival response.
Yeah. Oh,
froze.
totally.
Yeah.
Freeze, play dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If it didn't work, at least in some cases, our bodies wouldn't do it. And
and when we go into that freeze, sort of essentially opiates pump out, and we physically numb. It's like when we break our arm, and it doesn't hurt when we break it. By the time we get to the emergency room, it hurts like hell. But right when we do it, and for like 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't really hurt. You're just kind of looking at it going, oh, my arm's flopping around. That's weird.
Yeah, what the heck?
And that's a survival mechanism. If we get attacked by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever back in the day, if we shut down immediately and feel all that pain, we're never going to get away. But if we don't feel that pain, we can fight back, we can run away, we can help, and we might survive. It's a survival thing. Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, mine kicks in at inappropriate times. So, okay, we got a couple questions here. One out of the Q&A first. Hey there, guys. What does it mean when the other party reacts more to the tone of voice than to what's said? Why are people so sensitive to how it is said rather than what is said? What's behind that? Good question.
That is a good question. I tried to look this up one time, because the old adage that I've always heard is that 90% of communication is nonverbal. And I don't know if there's actually any research to back that up, or if that's is there?
Yeah.
I only say that because if I'm on here, right, as the expert, I'm making it clear that I'm not an expert on that data, right? I think, and hopefully I'm going to answer this question properly, but what I think we learn over the course of our lives is to be looking for all sorts of cues, right? Betrayed partners, I think, can sometimes be the huge experts in this, because somebody can say the right thing and it sounds fine, right? Or they are so good at saying the right words or phrasing it in a certain way, and it puts us at ease. And so we're looking for any clues we can to pick up on what is the actual intent of this other individual, because their intent is going to determine the outcome in the relationship, is what it at least feels like to us. And so we are trying to listen for tone of voice, verbiage, body language, anything we can to try and figure out, am I safe? Is there trust? Do we have attachment in this relationship? So it comes down to, again, what Scott and I were talking about, the brain trying to survive. And so we become like these silent detectives, or maybe miniature Sherlock Holmes, looking for all of the evidence that will support what we are either most afraid of or what we hope to believe, that sort of thing. Did that answer the question, you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking, it's the nonverbal part of it that we pick up And, I said my face gets red when I'm defensive or angry or whatever. So I can catch myself and say the right thing, but somebody who knows me knows that I'm having a reaction.
Right.
I have somebody in my life that, I would much rather have difficult conversations over the phone with this individual, because if he can see me on Zoom or in person, he knows that I'm having a feeling, and I'm not, that I'd rather not share because I'm not sharing it, but he can see me and he knows. And he takes whatever I'm saying differently than he would if it was over the phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah, just because I say the right thing doesn't mean I mean it, number one. And if my tone of voice isn't right, or my face isn't right, or, if my ears are quivering, or whatever it is that is my tell, you're going to know that I'm off. And I think that's probably what's happening with this question.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's good.
Okay. How might growing up in a family that mocked and teased all the time contribute to the development of addiction? The entire family, especially my addict husband, attempts to characterize this as good-natured ribbing, but I can see how pernicious and shaming it was. I can also see my husband teasing our children in the same way, to their consternation, but he insists it's all in good fun. Thoughts?
Wow. So just so you know, there's one in the chat that came earlier, but we'll make sure to grab
we'll
that.
Get to that in a second.
So this one, it's hard to say, right? Like how, being mocked definitely has, like, again, that it's tough because that is being mocked and teased. The hard part is it's up to the judgment. And this is what makes like sarcasm really unhealthy, is that it's up to the judgment of the person who hears it to internalize it, right? So if someone in a family could be mocked and teased and doesn't internalize it as shame. Now, this in no way means that this is okay. It in no way means that the behavior isn't maybe abusive, right? But the tough part is that if somebody's mocking and teasing me and I internalize it, which is really easy to do, especially if it's coming from a family member, if I internalize it and believe that they are doing it because I am somehow less than or unworthy, or I don't belong, or I don't fit in, or I'm not lovable, right? If I internalize it that way, could I find a substance or behavior or both that could become an addiction as a way of soothing that pain and those wounds? Yes, absolutely, I could do that, right? And so that's what makes it so difficult when you're dealing with somebody who struggles with addiction. They're often a kid who has so much hurt and pain, they're trying to figure out a way to survive. So if they're being mocked and teased, we are only increasing their possibility. It doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. Somebody could be bullied, beat up, sexually abused, teased, and still not become an addict. But we're only increasing that possibility and that they are going to find something to soothe. And if we don't find another healthy adult to attach to, if we don't find a secure attachment somewhere, then our likelihood of addiction goes much higher. So, and off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers, but what I remember learning in the attachment education that I've done is that we really only need one solid attachment in our lives in order to be a healthy, secure, attached person. And it can be, honestly, it could be a teacher at school, it could be a coach, it could be a grandparent, it could be obviously a parent, hopefully. But we need a healthy attachment somewhere to be able to get soothing and comfort from the pain. So mocking and teasing can easily be internalized as pain and hurt. So it's tough because maybe your husband uh, uses mocking and teasing, and maybe that's how he felt like he bonded with his siblings and with his parents. And so for him, he's just repeating the same unhealthy behavior, potentially unhealthy behavior, right? Because uh, you know, is some teasing okay? I don't know. It depends on what the teasing looks like, right? It depends on if we own it, if we talk to our kids, hey, I'm trying to be silly. I would never want you to think that that I don't love you or that I'm trying to hurt you. I was, can you tell me how that made you feel? Right. So we're getting feedback from our kids to try and understand how how our hopefully playfulness is impacting them. Because I may have no intention. It may be good natured. There's no ill will, but I'm still causing damage. So I want to check in with my kids and find out, hey, how did that make you feel? Are you hearing any negative messages from me? Obviously, in a kid appropriate way. And so then I want to finish off. So the other thing is that you're going to have to probably have a conversation about your fears, because even if it's good natured, even if there isn't harm, your fears are totally valid because you love your kids and you want to see them have a healthy life and have healthy interactions with their father, because every kid deserves a father, every kid deserves a mother, right? Like meaning they deserve healthy attachment is what I mean by that. We deserve people that we can healthily attach to. So your kids deserve that. So your fears are valid, and you'd be wanting to check in with the kids and with your husband and sharing those fears, as well as just talking to the kids and making sure that it's working for them. That was a long answer.
Yeah, and teasing is a really weird thing, and I grew up in a house where my mother, she would tell you she was good natured and teasing, and I would tell you that she was not good natured and that she was shaming.
Right.
And that is how I experienced it. And whereas I was a swimmer and I was really good, so I had to practice with guys who were 2 or 3 years older than me, and they would tease me. And they had a name for me, and I won't repeat it here because it was kind of a dirty, not very nice name.
Yep.
And it never once bothered me because it was good natured, and they would beat on me a little bit.
Is that how they teased each other?
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't them against you.
No, it was
when they did that to you. It was,
we like you. You're part of us.
I was part of the group.
Right. It was good-natured hazing, and hazing gets a really bad rep for good reasons these days.
Yeah,
but
the term I like to use is it's good-natured banter, right?
Yeah.
Like we banter, and the word, if you notice the word I used earlier, in my mind, I don't tease my kids, but I do try to be playful. I do try to have fun. I do try to be silly, but I do check in with them. Hey, because there's times where I realize, oh my goodness, I think I hurt my kids' feelings. And then I'll say, hey, what happened? Well, I told you to stop and you didn't. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, right? Like, I want to honor that.
Yeah, and that's what I never got from my mother. These older boys, if they had treated another kid my age the same way they treated me, it would have been horrible. They would have been bullying that kid. It would, but I didn't take it that way. But so it's subjective. It's the example I've given with trauma before to explain subjective. A new mother with her baby in the car has a 5-mile-an-hour accident, and she's freaking out, whereas a NASCAR driver has a 5-mile-an-hour accident and he just could care less.
Right. No, and it's tough because I could also dive in here, and we don't have a ton of questions popping up, although I think we're getting a few more. The interesting piece is I'm actually curious about your husband's response, right? Yeah. So when he says, oh, it's good-natured ribbing, right? Like, I actually wonder sometimes he may not know how to connect with them any differently, right? Like I said, this may be the way he was taught to bond and connect as a family. And so when you call him out and he's trying to connect with the kids and you call him out, his shame comes up, because if he can't tease, right? And I don't even want to suggest if he can't mock, right? Because just sounds terrible. But if he can't figure out a way to be playful in his own mind, tease in his own mind, then he's now going, well, what? I can't bond, I can't connect with my kids. So I would be curious if his shame is coming up and now he's getting defensive, like I talked a little bit about earlier. You're actually scared for the kids, but the truth is he's trying to figure out how to bond with them, and he may struggle with that naturally. And so you're calling him out, and it's just like, oh, good, one more thing I'm terrible at, one more thing that I don't know how to do right. And so I would want, if I had the opportunity to talk to him, to kind of go, hey, let's talk about this. She's afraid. What's going on? Are you feeling shame when she calls you out because she's scared? And I would want to try and explore that, because if he ultimately comes to you and says, honestly, I need to learn, I'm sad because I don't know how to bond with my kids any other way, and I'm scared if I don't do this, I won't have any connection with them. Now, he may not even have the insight or the vulnerability to be able to go there or even recognize that that's a possibility. But I see in a lot of cases that if we dig a little deeper, we find underneath that some of that stuff is going on.
Okay, let's take the one out of the chat feature here. My husband did not tell me that he could have been exposed to COVID-19. I don't know how he could have been exposed. It could have been a cheating thing or being in a crowd of people. When I tried to confront him about it, he dismissed my worries and said I was overreacting. I became very angry and felt it entirely in my body to protect my fear and pain. When this happens, my body is on autopilot, and I do not know how to get out of that. Normally, it turns into yelling or walking away, depending on the day. I cannot change my husband, but how do I keep my sanity with the emotions and work my way through it instead of lashing out? Excellent question. Yeah, this goes back to me, like the brain disconnect that isn't really a disconnect, but it's that natural reaction because something has come up that has.
Yeah. Right. And so here's the interesting part. Autopilot's there because it's trying to pilot you out of danger, right? And so we wouldn't want that to go away, but you are acknowledging that your responses aren't actually effective. And so what I encourage people to do in that situation is, one, do your best. Well, actually, let me try this first. Your fear is valid. Even if he does not feel that maybe COVID, because there's some people who don't feel like it's that big of a deal, it's something we shouldn't be worried about, and he may be trying to put onto you his beliefs around maybe what he feels is hype. But the sad part is you're actually going to him for comfort. You're going to him saying, hey, I'm scared. I don't like that this happened. Can you comfort me? Right? And you don't comfort somebody by telling them you're ridiculous. You have no reason to be comforted, right? What you do is say, hey, he would need to take ownership and say, I'm sorry that this is scary. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about some things maybe I can do differently. But you deserve to have that validation, and you didn't get it. And so obviously he's got some work to do. And so you're doing a good thing by moving to, okay, what can I manage and control? I realize I'm in autopilot. That feels scary. Sometimes I do unhealthy things in autopilot. One of the things I encourage people a lot to do is actually practicing meditation. And you can get guided meditation on YouTube. There's lots of different apps. There's one that has a bunch of free ones that's called Insight Timer. You can pay for really good ones that are like trying to think of there's lots of them out there, right? Just do a search for mindfulness in an app store. Headspace, that was one I was thinking of that's good that you pay for. But Um, and learning mindfulness is about connecting with our body and getting present with our body, which is really what I was talking about when we started this, right? Get present with my body. What's going on for me right now? And so if I can get mindful and I realize, okay, I want to be angry, I want to yell, I want to scream, and I can get present with myself very quickly, but still honor the danger that is there. The danger that's there is the person who I care about is not responding to me, is not showing up for me. That is dangerous. In addition to the danger that you feel you're in because you've potentially been exposed to COVID. So getting present with your body, learning how to breathe your way through it, give yourself space. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to feel hurt. I'm allowed to be scared. Because maybe the biggest danger here wasn't the potential exposure to COVID. It's that once again, he's not showing up for me. So those are some tools that I honestly tell people. Getting connected to our body, mindfulness is really good with that. People who practice yoga often are really good because they're connecting with their body, learning how to tune in. So there's a lot of different ways, but those are just some tools. If you do a search on Google, you might look for tools for grounding. So when we're in that autopilot, we need to learn to ground and get ourselves back down. Obviously, though, we get ourselves out of danger. If that means we need to walk away, go for a walk, call a friend, all of these help us to ground. And then bring us back down to where we can respond more appropriately. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas.
Yeah, there's tons of great apps out there. I'm a big fan of Breathwork too. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. Or 4-4-4-4, which is breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. I like 4-7-8 better because it just works better for me. But it kind of gets me out of my head, and there's tons of the sense thing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things I see, 4 things I smell.
Totally.
Tons of techniques that are grounding that really do work. I do them when I'm stuck in traffic because I live in Southern California. We get stuck in traffic, and it's miserable. In addition to interpersonal relations,
Yeah.
So.
No, those are breath work. I mean, there are so many tools out there. That's why it's hard, because everybody has to discover what their toolbox is, and you start to kind of go, okay, this one really works for me. So you start to find, and I wouldn't just settle with one. I would try and find as many as you can.
Okay. How do you react when the other party is often interrupting a conversation? And when you're speaking and you want to explain, and constant interruptions become annoying. I say in the moment, please, can I speak? But then it happens again and again. And also my info doesn't come over. What's behind this one? So 2 questions. What's behind this behavior, and how do I react to it?
Yeah, I actually loved it because I actually read it like, what do you do, Matt? And I'm like, that's a great question. So what I encourage every one of us to do, again, it's get present with our body, right? And so in that moment, I will often say to a person, I'm having a hard time hearing you, right? I might say to them, I'm having a hard time hearing you, and I'm having a hard time being heard. And so if you keep speaking, I'm not sure that I'm going to hear you, right? And interestingly enough, I'm actually just speaking my truth. Right? When you talk to, because if you were asking me, that's what happens for Matt, right? Like where I'm like, wow, somebody has so much going on here. I'm overwhelmed. That's another thing I might tell somebody, hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like you've said a lot and I'm confused. Are you needing me to respond, or are you just needing me to hear and have all this information come at me, because I'm not sure you're going to get your need met, because I'm now overwhelmed and I can't hear you anymore. right? Can we break this into smaller pieces? And so I might even say to somebody, I'm pretty good at this point, but I don't know that I would tell them, hey, what you're doing is annoying. I would just tell them, I feel overwhelmed. I feel flooded, right? I feel past my capacity. If I tell them, hey, what you're doing is annoying, I've learned that people will take that on. You think I'm annoying? And it's like, oh, great. Here we go again, right? So the hard part is I actually think you're asking also another question. I think you're in that moment trying to be heard and wanting to know, what do I do to be heard? And the truth is, I think the closest thing you can say, the best thing you can say in that moment, if they just keep going, is, I don't feel like I can hear you. I'm not feeling like you can hear me. I want to hear you. I want you to hear me. And you stay in that moment. I wouldn't even try to explain myself. It's not going to get anywhere. So if I stay in that moment and just say, honestly, I'm not hearing all the things that you deserve to have me hear. You're not hearing what I'm needing to share either.
What's behind, as I interrupt you, what's behind the behavior of somebody who constantly interrupts? What might...
The interesting thing is that I might take, like, if I can't ground that person in the moment, which that's my goal. Hey, if I can't ground them enough to say, hey, what's going on? I think a lot of times by me saying to somebody, I'm not hearing you, that actually could make them angrier. Because my guess is, if they're talking without interruption, what they're trying to say is, nobody hears me. You don't hear me. So let me talk, and throw everything on you because I'm hoping you'll hear me. And so a lot of times, that's what I see is happening. So I'll ask them in that conversation, are you not feeling heard? Are you not feeling understood? And sometimes it's, yes, that's exactly what's going on. How often is that happening for you? All the time. That's why I talk like this. Okay, well, the truth is, I can't hear you when this much is coming at me. Let's slow it down. Let's break it into chunks. Let's talk about smaller pieces, because I can't take that much information in. So is that always what's behind it? Maybe not. But I think that might give some insight into what I see is often behind it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, next one here. My mother-in-law never treats me like family. She treats me coldly and stonewalls me. My husband says that she's acting normal and that the problem is me. I don't know what to do, and I'm distancing from my husband. Any thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, your husband's probably not wrong. She is acting normal. That doesn't mean that it's not painful to you. That doesn't mean, right? Like, it might be normal to him because that's all he's ever known. Now, I don't know if when he's telling you that, he's trying to say, like, this is how normal people act. That would certainly be very painful to me. If essentially I'm trying to take this to my husband, and he's telling me, you need to get over it, this is how normal people act, it'd be like, oh, here I've been vulnerable, here I'm sharing with you my pain, and you're dismissing it. Now, part of me wonders if what he's saying is, because it sounds, you're causing conflict, is what it sounds like he's saying. That tells me he's trying to tell you, hey, I learned well how to survive this family. And you're coming in here and you're disrupting the family system. And so rather than taking an outside approach, which is not easy to do, he grew up in that family and he learned, don't mess with mom, give her her way, give her her space. rather than say, hey, yeah, what she does is really painful and I've learned just to leave her alone. He puts it on you and says like, hey, stop being so contentious. See, this is evidence of how contentious you are in life. This is evidence of how much conflict you cause. He probably over time needs to realize that all of our family systems are different, and because you are trying to, I think I've said this before, not everybody loves it, but one of the things that I actually teach is that attachment, bonding, closeness occurs in the repair of conflict. And so you're, in a way, causing conflict typically to try and find repair. And the problem is she may not want repair, she may not want attachment, or not in a way that makes her confront her shame. And your husband's response is basically, follow the status quo and everything will be fine. Stop being a troublemaker. So hopefully, I don't know if I went lots of places there, and hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that question could go lots of places. The one thing I wanted to add is, different people need different levels of closeness and connection. And, mother-in-law here might just be kind of a cold fish and not really want to connect with anybody.
Right. So you're trying to repair or create attachment, and she's not really interested.
Yeah.
Now, she may not even
make her uncomfortable, and she may flash out. Yeah.
And what's interesting, she's interested in attachment as long as it is according to her rules and needs and everything else. But that's kind of gross, right? That doesn't feel good. If I can't get, a healthy relationship is we meet each other's needs and we show up for each other and we learn to love and care for each other the way that we each need it. But yeah, she may not have that ability or want it or whatever.
Yeah, what you need could make her just as uncomfortable as what she seems to need makes you uncomfortable. And yeah, I mean, just not everybody's going to be super close, especially with, the mother-in-law, although I know plenty of people who love their mother-in-law dearly. So I don't really know where that joke comes from. I mean, most of the people I know really like their mother-in-law.
Well, I mean,
not everybody, but
I mean, the funny part about it is in this instance, it isn't about a mother-in-law. What we've talked about applies to every individual. It applies to somebody at work who we maybe want to connect with and get close to, but no matter how much we try, they just don't, right? Like this concept applies really in every relationship or any relationship. So yeah, I hear you there.
Yeah. Okay. Post some more questions. We got a few minutes left here. I have an update on the teasing. The kids definitely don't like it. Almost feels like a repetition compulsion to me because you can see they get upset. Like he does the same supposedly funny routines his dad did. He seems in denial that those routines were harmful to him and therefore that there's anything wrong with what he's doing. Your shame comment resonates though. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest one about this, there is a concept referred to as like trauma bonding, where we bond to somebody who causes us trauma. And it's possible that his dad caused him trauma and he felt very bonded and loved by his dad. I mean, the reality of it is that all of us as parents have the ability to cause trauma or to somehow traumatically impact our children, and still we very much love them, right? Like, so the truth is his dad could have been a good father. And if nothing else, it's the only father he had. And his dad didn't know how to bond with him, didn't know how to connect with him. Who knows, right? Like you're going to know better than we are. But ultimately, again, I kind of go back to that same concept. It sounds like if he did bond to his father that way, maybe he doesn't know any other way to bond. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think. I mean, you talk about him being in denial. He might be. Or again, he might just think that this is how life is. I mean, that could be a state of denial. There's some, I've tried to read, I wasn't bonded to my father, if I'm being honest. And I've tried to spend time figuring out, what does a good father do? How does a good father act? It hasn't been the easiest thing for me at times to know how to do that. And so I've spent a lot of time reading books. I remember reading a book years ago that had been recommended. I think a client actually told me, hey, this is a really good book that's helping me. And I remember reading it. And that was like or Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, I think, by Meg Meeker. But me as a father, I just started trying to read anything I could or listen to anything I could to figure out what are other ways I could bond with my children. And in the same way, what are the things I could be doing that might be causing harm? I know for a fact, as good as of a dad as I am, my kids one day are going to tell me, Dad, I didn't realize, but when you used to do this, this made me feel shame. And the best thing I can do in that moment is to honor that and say to them, really, tell me more. Why did that cause shame? What did that bring up for you? I want to hear all about it. And then ultimately, once they feel like I hear and understand, then I'm going to say, can I apologize? Can I tell you, I want you to know I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you that way. I want to figure out, I will do my best to figure out how to show up for my kids, because we all cause them harm in one way or another as parents. It's just part of the responsibility. Just like we cause our friends harm, we cause our family harm. Like,
and there is such a thing, by the way, as a parent who's too perfect, who perfectly responds to every situation. And the kid is never able to grow or face adversity or learn if the parent's too good. So
sure,
there's a nice happy medium there.
Oh, for sure. So I'm proud of you for, like, the tough part is that if you're trying to help your husband, you're not going to do it by activating his shame. And so you've got to figure out, and this is not easy, but something that I might try to do is, outside of the moment, I might say, hey, I want to talk to you about something and I want to understand, but and I would start probably by saying, I'm afraid I'm going to hit your shame and I want to have a conversation with you. Are you willing to have a conversation and let me know if I hit your shame? And then if his shame comes up, you're going to have to go there, because that's his wound. And try to talk about his wound and help him understand, try and understand and explore that with him. There's no way he's going to heal. And if you can't do that, I don't blame you, right? You've got a lot of hurt around it too, because it looks to you like he's harming your kids. So, but I would try and open up that dialogue with him, ask him if he's willing. Can we go there? I want to understand that. I'm wondering if there's other ways you can bond with the kids that might be better for you and them. That's probably the direction I would try to take. Hopefully that's helpful to you.
Okay. Yeah, relationships, it's all about communications. I mean, I think that's basically what all of our answers always boil down to every time we're on, is like, talk about it.
Yeah, talk about it, but it's tricky, because sometimes it's figuring out, man, I'm dealing with somebody's like super pain. How do I now approach that, right? So in the moment, it might be helpful for me to stand up for my kids and say, hey, I am so sorry. You don't deserve that. I know it's hurting you, right? And they may need that. And at other times, it's approaching him when things have calmed down and saying, hey, we really need to talk.
Let's bump on to the next question here. We are early in sex addiction recovery. My husband's been working recovery for 8 months. We're separated, but we're attempting to reunite. I find that we can both be defensive at times when faced with important conversations. Any tips on how to manage these early times where shame versus lack of trust can continue to affect our two roles? We're working on our relationship and trying not to throw barbs and fight, and we're successful in that step, but we stall when conversations move around and to wants and needs that would move us forward. You suggest any method to deflect the defensiveness in your spouse if they're not owning that feeling. As a spouse, should we say anything or end the conversation? I often feel this urge to run.
Yeah.
A lot in that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Again, that urge to run is the autopilot, right? That we've talked about already a couple of times. And that just shows how scary it feels to you, how much danger it feels like to you. Deflecting defensiveness, like I've talked about, I think it would be pretty wise to actually say, you know what, I'm feeling defensive. Are you feeling it too? Right? And you know, it might be, no, I'm not feeling defensive. Okay, well, I know I'm feeling defensive, and here's where I'm feeling it in my body. And I want to explain myself. Literally, this is what I'm saying. But I realize that you want to explain yourself too. So we're kind of stuck here, aren't we? Right? So you're kind of calling out, or you're totally calling out where we're at right now, right? I'm feeling defensive. I feel like, you know, the story I tell myself is you're defensive. Is that true? You know, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Okay, well, if you're not defensive and I am, then it feels like we're stuck. Do you feel stuck right now? Right? And then it, you know, it depends, right? If the next response is no, I don't feel stuck, and this is where we always go because you always do this. Okay, so now I feel like you're telling me I'm the problem. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because I'm having a hard time hearing anything else. I want to run right now. And if I run, how's that going to feel? If I leave the room, is that going to make you feel abandoned or rejected? I'm also worried that if we don't figure this out, we have these important conversations that aren't going to get done, like get met between the two of us. So again, I'm trying to, like, literally those words that I would talk exactly about what's happening for me in this moment, and also reiterate, and I want to go here. I want to do this with you. I want to understand, but I feel like we keep getting stuck. That's what I would try and do to break that up, to gain awareness about why you're getting stuck.
I want to pull out shame versus lack of trust, right in the middle of the question there. To me, that feels like the dynamic in much of, if not most of, the conflict when, you know, there's a sex addict and a betrayed partner. Can you talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, it feels to me like, I mean, just really quickly as I thought about it, shame versus lack of trust. Shame is, you know, I'm unworthy, something's wrong with me, I don't deserve love and connection or attention, right? Lack of trust is, I might deserve this and I want it, but I don't trust that if I ask for it, it's going to show up, right? So the tough part is, you might be feeling a lack of trust or shame, and you've got to figure out, is this me not wanting to be vulnerable with him because, or her, because they aren't going to show up? Or is this me feeling shame and feeling like hopeless, that I shouldn't even bother trying because they're never going to be able to show up? And I would try, let's see, I'm trying to figure out the question on that one. So it's gaining that awareness and starting to share that with each other. Hey, my shame's coming up right now, and I'm having a hard time hearing you because the only thing I can think of is that I'm a failure as a husband. I'm a failure as a wife. I'm a failure as a partner, right? So you share that shame. As far as the lack of trust, I would probably say you approach that maybe in a way where you're able to identify what you might need, or to say, hey, I'm struggling to have trust right now. I want to open up and be vulnerable. I'm worried you're not going to be able to be here for me, or I'm worried that your shame's going to come up, or I'm worried that you're going to feel hurt or attacked by me, right? All that is, I'm sharing my worries. I'm sharing my fears, as opposed to telling them you're untrustworthy. This is your shame, right? We don't want to go there. We want to own our side and be accountable for our side. Do you
Yeah,
think
and
that helped it, Scott? Is that?
yeah, I mean, the dynamic I was thinking, I'm the addict and I'm filled with all this shame. So of course, when you question me because you don't trust me right now, and rightfully so, I get defensive. And then, if I'm the betrayed partner and you're telling me something and I don't trust you, I get I kind of get defensive because I want you to hear me and understand that I don't trust what you're saying and you're not hearing, and it's just that boom, 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 and we're
Yeah.
both getting defensive, and it's what we've been talking about all hour.
And if I were to say the biggest complaint, or maybe it's the hardest to hear because I can feel it, that I get from a partner, a betrayed partner, is that I bring to you my hurt, but he's so full of shame and he's still working through all of that, that immediately his shame comes up. So now we're dealing with his shame. So every time I bring my hurt and my pain and I want to rebuild trust, we're now taking care of him and his shame. So it's like the tables get turned every time. And I'm trying to have him show up for me or have her show up for me, and it always becomes about them and their shame. And the tough part is there, I mean, it's an awful cycle to see happen, and it's very valid. It's very real. It's a miserable thing that occurs.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons it's so important for betrayed partners to get their own support,
Yeah,
as I think a lot of people are doing on this webinar today.
absolutely.
So, yeah. We are out of time. That went fast.
It did. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in with questions. It's my favorite to just jump right in. So good job.
This is such a cool topic because we get questions about defensiveness all the time. So to have it like a whole session focused on that was really cool. So
yeah, hopefully it's helpful. And honestly, go try it. And when it works and when it doesn't work, come back. Let's talk about it, because we can dive into nuances to understand more and more of how to stay present in all of that.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Matt, for your time and your effort and your insight and answers and great hair and fun socks and everything else.
I love it.
We'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. We'll be back. Kim will be back between Matt's visit, but we'll see you then. So thanks everybody.
We'll be back. Thank you.